Welcome friends to another 40k video. Today we'll look at scenes from The Master of Mankind by Aaron Dembski-Bowden. The Emperor speaks to Ra, one of his Adaptes Custodes, and we see what he's shown about the Emperor's early life, at least as it's presented to him here. I have no doubt the Emperor is trying to get the Custodes to be prepared for something, telling him what he will need to hear. Now let's get straight into it. The Emperor as a boy holds his father's skull. He knew what had happened. He touched the hole in it and knew, a bronze knife from behind, and he also saw. Outside, mud brick huts lined either side of the river. Families laughed and fought, and the boy, who would be Emperor, went to his father's brother. When this man looked on the skull of his brother, he suffered a heart attack. This place was known as Terror, now, but once had been known as Earth. The Emperor's hands were rough with work from the farm. And like the man he would become, he never smiled, but worked and brought life from the ground. He explains to Ra the killing of his father's murderer was illuminating. It taught him the deliverance of justice, and says this runs throughout humanity. The leader wants to know why his people were attacked. The Emperor says they will live. The army and the leader will not. This man scoffs at the Emperor, saying to others he is the Emperor of mankind. The Emperor says he brings illumination. He and Ra then discuss how the Emperor speaks in the right tongue of whoever hears it. And perhaps there is no language when speaking mind to mind. When the first human killed one of its own, not out of a need to survive, it began to feed the beings in the warp. It set humans on a long path and created a demon over time called the End of Empires. That human was killing someone else for the pleasure of it, not out of necessity, such as would happen in warfare. And it is killing from pleasure that attracts the creatures from the warp, and why they have not really been involved before this point. Next, Ra sees the priest king of Morland before executing him. This man had gathered free food and water to share, and said his god was involved in these kind acts. But warp creatures had given the man these powers to grow his clan, and taking others during winter to feed and shelter them. These miracles over time became more occult. As the book tells it, what is the life of one child if the offer of its bloody beating heart will ensure a monarch's immortality? Is a price a very selfish man would pay, I think. This was the warp's corruption, and other clans came to challenge the holy man, using machines from the old age to clone and make warriors, and the clan wanted the power their overlord had. All from superstition, all from ignorance, all because one charismatic man believed that the power that heeded his calls could be trusted. The Emperor echoes this man in a way, a charismatic leader at this stage who will put more in science than faith. And we see later how this changes when the Emperor is on his throne broken and worship of him spreads throughout the Imperium. Even during his life, I can imagine an ordinary person wanting to do this in the face of the Emperor and his psychic powers and intelligence. Then the holy man came to believe he was strong enough to control them. As the Emperor tells us, superstition and ignorance always attracts the warp's denizens, continued the Emperor. For the core of religion is the twinned principle of arrogance and fear, fear of oblivion, fear of an unfair life and an arbitrary universe, fear of there simply being nothing, no great and grand scheme to existence, the fear ultimately of being powerless. Looking at the captured man again, Ra saw the taint of chaos. Talons rippled in the shadows cast by the man's cloak, and the man's body was tainted. Bulges wormed their maggoty way through the man's veins, bubonically swollen. This is why the comfort of religion is removed, as it opens people up to chaos's influence and he sets it out starkly. We are a species alone in the dark, threatened by the laughing games of sentient malignancies that mortals would call gods. The Emperor shows Ra terror during the Unification Wars. Warlords and arch-priestesses and magician kings and clan chiefs fight over the harrowed territory of a broken world. The Emperor went against them all. Then Ra's consciousness is thrown through the galaxy to the Eldari, and he sees how they, like some of mankind, were corrupted by the warp and fell, and their energies and debauchery gave birth to a new demon from the warp, Slanesh. The Emperor says, if humanity falls, it will be worse, yet humanity's death will eclipse the Eldar's annihilation tenfold, for we are evolving into a more psychically powerful race. Uncontrolled psychic energy will tear reality apart. The warp creatures will feed on the carcass of the galaxy. There must be control, and control must be maintained. Humanity, as they become more and more psychic, will be like a beacon in the dark to the warp's creatures, and he wants to avoid the Eldari's fate. One plan for this was the webway, which would protect humanity from the warp and let them travel through it. It would cut humanity off from it, and that is why he conquered the galaxy, to shepherd humanity. But the webway plan did not work because Magnus the Red, Primarch son of the Emperor, tried to warn him about his traitor son Horus, and because of the way he did it with his psychic powers, it created warp rifts within the webway that allowed the creatures there to slip in and end his plan. None can remain free from him in case they would fall to chaos, and to remove superstition and religion, as they are doors through which the warp can influence humanity. The idea was once humanity lives in and could travel around the webway, then the Emperor can shepherd our psychic race to fruition. The Emperor says tyranny is not the end, Ra. Absolute control is, but the means to the end. So he has a noble endgame that justifies to him, at least, what he must do, even if sometimes he must make cruel choices. The hubris, the necessity. The Emperor's voice was iced iron, not arrogance, not vainglory, necessity. I have already told you, Ra, humans need rulers. Now you see why. A single murder is on one end of the spectrum, for rulers bring law. The hope of the entire race is at the far end of the continuum, for I, as ruler, bring salvation. His ambition here makes Ra cry. We see the care here and the hubris and the ambition and the vision and the self-belief. Some say the Emperor is very emotional, others very cold and distant. I think he's also what he needs to be to fulfill his vision, a complex human being with great ambition, and other flaws come out from taking the mantle of humanity's fate onto himself. Now, friends, I turn this over to you. What do you think to the Emperor's ambitions? Is there a way he can still protect humanity from the warp without the webway? Have you spoken to someone using your mind only? Comment down below.